welcome to our monthly wisdom session. First, I think let's now welcome our trainers and meta coaches from institutes around the world. Make plenty of noise, no matter how number we are, plenty of noise to show the force of our welcome and community spirit. Let's bring in the institutes. So first we have here from Africa.
Welcome,
Institute of
Africa.
NeuroSemantics Africa. Welcome, Africa. Whoa, wherever you are. Next is Institute of NeuroSemantics Australia. Yeah, it's 11.
While they're sleeping, we're talking.
11 p.m. in Australia, I think. Institute of NeuroSemantics Brazil.
Bienvenido.
Bem-vindos.
Institute of NeuroSemantics Egypt, Middle East, and North Africa.
And they're diving in the Red Sea
That's
right
where
now.
we are.
Egypt on the boat in the Red Sea, and Michael is there at Sharm el Sheikh, yeah? Institute of NeuroSemantics Scandinavia.
Welcome,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the Institute of NeuroSemantics Hong Kong and China.
Welcome, Hong Kong, China.
I know. Tiu Hongping is there. Institute of NeuroSemantics Indonesia.
Selamat datang.
What's next now? Institute of NeuroSemantics Latin America and Mexico.
Hola.
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 Yes.
Institute of NeuroSemantics Malaysia, including
Malaysia.
Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and India. Hello. And the Institute of NeuroSemantics US of A.
Yeah.
Yay.
So welcome to our monthly wisdom session, a crucible for learning and insight as we grow, being beacons of light for our local communities in the journey of growth and self-actualization. I'm delighted now to invite our main torchbearer for self-actualization, Dr. Michael Hall, to guide us through our another arsenal, metaphorical thinking in our toolkit for our mission. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Michael Hall, speaking from Sharm el Sheikh.
Woohoo.
That's the best introduction I've had all week. So we started a series on thinking, executive thinking and humorous thinking, different kinds of thinking, predictive thinking, lots of different kinds of thinking. And today, metaphorical thinking. And so I'm going to look at the role of metaphors and how it is integral to metastating and how it is just innate to how we make meaning in terms of our semantics. So metaphorical thinking. And our first slide is a metaphor a day keeps the doctor away, which is a metaphor. So here's some questions, and I've put a metaphor in each one. Are you chomping at the bit to get started? I've designed this to be a beacon of hope for the future. If metaphors are new to you, then consider toying with it as a new idea that might open all sorts of new doors. And that's because metaphors can be a booby trap if you're not careful. So if you notice all the metaphors, common words, common phrases, and it's so tempting to think of a metaphor as just pretty poetry, as a figure of speech. And yet it is so much more, as we're going to find out here in a few minutes. Metaphors are also 1/4 of all the words we speak actually is a metaphor. And so they're everywhere. They're just everywhere. And if you're not aware of them, then a metaphor can communicate some unpleasant, toxic, limiting, disempowering meanings, and you not even know it. So our next slide, metaphors are everywhere. The quotation here is from Lakoff and Johnson, who wrote the book Metaphors We Live By. That book is really
I'm watching
Yes.
the live session of Dr. Mike.
Having it right now?
No, they told me that the whole price for 1 day, 27,000 Egyptian pounds.
No.
so we're hearing you. If you want to mute your mic. Okay. So our next slide is metaphors are everywhere. And here's a quotation from George Lakoff and Mark Johnson from a classic book that if this is a subject that interests you, I'd really recommend it. Metaphors We Live By. They write, metaphorical thought is unavoidable. It's ubiquitous and mostly unconscious. We live our lives on the basis of the inferences that we derive from a metaphor. And so we're going to look at how metaphors set up inferences, and therefore we can communicate to ourselves and others limiting beliefs through metaphors and not even know it. So this is both good news and bad news. So in terms of the bad news, be aware, warning, metaphors ahead, and you're going to encounter a lot of them, and get ready for these visitors of your mind. And once again, notice the metaphors in these phrases. Some of these will nurture your heart and mind. Some could poison your heart and mind. So here's a couple statements. Someone says, I guess I'm just a couch potato. So it's a figure of speech, and they're framing themselves in terms of this common phrase, couch potato. And a potato on a couch is just sitting there, inactive, doing nothing, pretty mindless. And so all of that gets communicated. Another person says, I feel like all my emotions are boiling up, building up for an explosion. So here's the subject of emotions. It is framed with this metaphor of something building up, boiling up. Emotions must be a substance with this metaphor, and this substance must increase heat until it explodes. Well, none of that is true. It's metaphorical. It could be true for a person who says that. Our next slide. What is a metaphor? Well, it comes from metaphorian, and so in metaphoring, you're carrying, phorian, one thing over to, above a meta to another thing. So the little diagram there, you start with an intangible idea, and then you bring something tangible, trying to understand it. So in the previous one, we had emotions as the intangible idea or experience. And then to understand an emotion, we brought the idea of boiling water that's going to boil and boil and explode. So in metaphoring, we're doing the opposite that we do in metastating. In metastating, we start with something we know, and then we bring a frame to it to bring that other state to that state, and it sets that frame. Here, we're starting with something we don't know, and we're trying out different frames or metaphors. So the next slide, a metaphor is giving a name to something that belongs to something else. So it belongs to something else, but we're going to use it as a comparison. And that's what we're doing when we metaphor. So this way of patterning your thinking by using some old thinking, something familiar, something you already know, and now we put together something new. In the two phrases here, she's hot or he's cool, we're comparing a person and we're bringing the sense of temperature to the way they express themselves and their level of activity. So a metaphor. Let's go to Shakespeare. Shakespeare said that Juliet is the sun. Well, that's what Romeo said. Romeo said that Juliet is his son. So here's a person, and he's going to compare her to the sun, something we all know. So he's communicating that she is his light, she is his brightness, she is his warmth, she is his hope, she is his life. So inside of one little word, the sun, a lot of connotations, a lot of entailments can be communicated, and that's the power of a metaphor. You can say a whole lot with a metaphor. You can say things implicitly without having to say them explicitly. So let's consider this way. Confusion is the gateway to new learnings. That's our next slide. Confusion is the gateway to new learnings. This is what Richard Bandler said in NLP, and we quote it oftentimes, that when you get confused, actually, you're standing at a gate and you have a way into learning something new. So let's analyze that with the next slide. So we put gateway above confusion. Confusion is what we don't understand. What is it like? How should we think about it? How should we interpret it? So we ask the question, how is confusion a gateway to new learnings? So even though it's a metaphor, it may not be immediately understandable. So within confusion is abundance of details and scarcity of structure. That's why we're confused. Lots of details, no structure. So it then functions like a gate so that we go search for a unifying frame that'll give us structure. And as a doorway, then we can walk into a new place, a new world, a new dimension, and gain insights and awarenesses. So simple little phrase. And when we start looking at it from the standpoint of metaphor and what's occurring, a lot is occurring here. So in this sense, this gives us metaphorical thinking. And that's our next slide. And so why? Why do we think metaphorically? Well, the answer is actually quite easy, because words are not real. Words only work as a symbol that refer to and stand for something other than themselves. So whatever you say something is, it's not. So if you say that she's like a cat, well, that word cat is just a map, and it can't scratch you. It's just a word. So the word is not the referent. Whatever you say it is, it's not. So now we can start to unlock the mystery of this concept of metaphorical thinking. So our next slide is that all of thinking, all of language is ultimately metaphorical. So everything is just a map, not the territory. And that map is just made up of symbols of something else or metaphors. Now, when a metaphor is an old phrase that we've heard over and over, we call them cliches. So he marches to a different drum. He let the cat out of the bag. She's a broken record. He bulldozes when he makes a point. It's a walk in the park. Should be park. It's a piece of cake. Or being around her is like walking on eggshells. So when a phrase that uses metaphors is old and cliche, we really lose awareness of the metaphor. When it's new and fresh, then we become aware of the metaphor and the invitation it offers us to think something new. Next slide, metaphors help us think. So with every metaphor, you actually have a template for thinking. I'm going to think about this subject from this perspective. So the metaphor sets up a template. It is an interpretive schema. It is a classification or a frame for whatever it is we're talking about. Here's a phrase. Your words are fingerprints of your world. So now we talk about something that's more intangible, a person's inner world. And the words are like fingerprints of that world. And so we can take a person's fingerprints by listening to their words, helping us to understand their world. And so with metaphors, we think. And with that thinking, then it opens up all kinds of new vistas. The next slide gives us some more examples. Uncertainty is your rocket ride into the now. So Steen Kotler said that. Uncertainty, when you're uncertain, it's a rocket ride inviting you to come back to the here and the now because you're uncertain of what's going on. The best things in life are not things at all. Trying out a new metaphor is like floating a balloon trial, seeing what happens. So metaphors are everywhere. They're in all of our languages and phrases. And with these metaphors, we're implying certain things. Here, floating a balloon trial is experimenting. But we haven't said that. We just implied that. So our next slide, via metaphors, you can imply all kinds of things. That's what a metaphor does. It presupposes things that are not explicitly stated. And so now we can imply and state things implicitly rather than explicitly. So here's a metaphor about a metaphor. You have to be alert since you never know when a metaphor may pop up and surprise you. So metaphor, which is what we're trying to understand, the frame is, it's like a person who can pop up and surprise us unexpectedly. The next one, metaphors regularly hack into a person's brain. So now we're using a computer metaphor to talk about how ideas can get into someone's mind, someone's brain. So the next slide, more about implication and implying. Are you ready to pull back the semantic curtains and see the power behind the throne? So an allusion to the story of Wizard of Oz, pulling back the curtains to see the wizard who's pulling all the levers to control things. And so now we can do the same thing in terms of that's the frame around what's happening and what's happening behind the scenes, and that there are processes, someone controlling the power. One time I walked into Starbucks and the greeter greeted me by saying, "How's the world treating you today?" I immediately heard that metaphor. That presupposes, that implies the world does things to me. It implies I'm a victim of the world. It implies that all the power is out there in the world doing things and I'm responding, reacting. So my answer was, I don't know. I have no idea, because my focus is on how I'm responding to the world, how I'm treating the world. And as a therapist, I'm trying to help it to heal. So throwing in a little metaphor there, I'm trying to help it to heal. I haven't stated explicitly something that is broken or that it's sick or that it needs healing, but all that is implied. If you want to fly, the cocoon has to go. So flying here is metaphorical for turning loose, going for it, doing your best, unleashing. And if you're going to unleash, you got to get out of the cocoon, the safety, the comfort zone, the protection. You've got to expose yourself and push out of the cocoon and now take a risk. So much can be said in so little with a metaphor. So here's another whole set of slides. In the next slide, metaphors again. We've heard it many times said that his bark is worse than his bite. So we're implying that lots of sounds, but not a bite that hurts. So it might, on the surface, seems like it's hurting, but we're framing it with this metaphor. Other metaphors, phrases here. He crumbled when his boss criticized his work. Well, crumbling, kind of the metaphor of a cookie, crumbling, a person falling apart, a person not being able to stand, a person not being able to face the criticism. I wonder where she learned to think Neanderthal. Well, Neanderthal is a metaphor for someone pretty primitive, someone who mostly grunts instead of articulating clearly. So with a metaphor, that gets real close to being a critical, almost a poisonous metaphor. The next one, metaphor enables new learnings. So metaphors do this by framing and reframing. And that's what it is, that we're putting another frame around something other than the one we started with. So with a metaphor, you can conceptualize a whole new way of thinking about it. And an easy way to do that is just to ask, what other metaphor is that like? How else could we compare it? And so once we have a metaphor, we start reasoning from the metaphor. And that leads us to not only new learnings, but new states. So the next metaphor, the next slide is a set of metaphors. How many states can you induce with a metaphor? So the phrase, would you want to switch off your worry? Now we're inviting a state, maybe a state interrupt, or maybe a state change to switch it off. Where's the switch? To turn off the worry, turn on something else. So it can induce states. It can prime in the sense of creating response potential by offering a metaphor. When we use the phrase, are you ready to turn the page? We're inviting someone now to go somewhere else and alter or change their state. Here's another metaphorical phrase for change. Let's put that in high gear and zoom through this page. So metaphors. The next slide, just a lot more metaphors. And this comes from Jim Collins. If you put fences around people, you get sheep. So the metaphor, this one is really suggestive of what a fence will do, or a boundary will do, a wall will do. The people inside, now contained, now not able to express themselves, become sheep. I can understand why you are putting your head in the sand. Did you anticipate its smells and tastes? I'm not overwhelmed. I like drinking from a fire hose. And here's one that'll induce a state. You'll walk like a giant. You'll sing like a Julie Andrews. You'll burst forth like the spring. So yes, a lot of figures of speeches, but so much more, now inducing states. So next slide. Is this getting you, whetting your appetite for metaphors? Hope so. Next slide. Metaphors can induce humor. And so we can use metaphors to lighten up, gain new perspective, reduce resistance, bring people together as they laugh, energize the senses. So here's one. He looks funny. He had tightened his belt during the recession, and then he forgot to let it out. So the word picture that the metaphor draws about someone operating from scarcity, when the scarcity time was gone, he still has his belt really tight, and now looking uncomfortable. So it can tickle your brain. It can induce humor. It can lead to creativity and be a booster of creativity, as Einstein knew. That's our next slide. Metaphors can boost creativity, and that's because of the new thinking and the different ways that we think using metaphors. And that's the next slide as well. When you do metaphor mining, so digging down deep into a metaphor, you can open up investigations into mysteries that would make Sherlock Holmes proud. So several metaphors in that one phrase. Let the creativity with metaphors bubble up like a stream from a hot spring. It might become a geyser of creativity. Metaphors can be self-inventing, and this is part of their creativity. So the next slide, when you tell me your metaphor, because it is suggestive, because it implies so much, I can tell a lot about you, your personality, your style, your way of being in the world. Metaphors tell on us. So here's an exercise for self-awareness. Start making a list of some of the metaphors you use about life, about work, about living, about yourself. Those metaphors are telling. They reveal the world that you come from. So here's some other examples. How is the spark in your inner flame today? And so to answer that, we have to have that awareness. There's an inner flame. Now, how is that flame? Is it bright? Is it robust? Is it weak? Is it damp? And now we can really do a lot of exploring as we run with a metaphor and to see where it will take us. And most metaphors will take you somewhere. If you were to take the first step on a journey to new possibilities, what would that step be? So self-inventing. So once again, to show the structure of a metaphor, our next slide, when you metaphor, you're actually metastating. You're bringing a state, which is going to be meta, higher, to whatever the subject is and whatever the original state is. Let's apply that to anger. So the next slide, respectful anger. I want to honor your anger as a powerful resource for developing the backbone to stand up for your values. So here you can see anger, and healthy anger is anger at injustice. Now we got the frame of reference here that anger is a powerful resource. It's a backbone. So metastating with metaphors. Our next slide, more of the same. As you listen to my voice, you can realize that the permissions you want, the permissions to be your best self, to speak up for yourself, is being broadcasted into your unconscious mind. So the frame, broadcasting, and broadcasting now to the unconscious mind. So metastating with metaphors. Next slide, more examples. That's an interesting idea, but be careful not to marry it before you date it sufficiently. Well, that's an invitation to do some critical thinking, think something through. The next one, when you hear a metaphor and you jump on to take a ride, keep your wits so you'll know when it's time to get off. So obviously the comparison is riding a horse, riding a bull. And the invitation is when you hear a metaphor, ride it so far, but know when it's time to get off of the metaphor, because it may take you places you don't want to go. Our next slide. More examples here. Some ideas are just garbage. It's better to be diligent about taking out the garbage or there'll be stink in the mind. So that plays off of an old phrase that we heard in the 70s, garbage in, garbage out. But it now runs with it a little bit to add some sensory information to it. Talking to my boss is like a pissing match with a skunk. So metaphors. So metaphoring skills, and that's our next slide. And this will lead us to a set of skills, skills to use metaphors. So there are some skills, and I'm going to mention, I think, 11 skills very quickly, skills that you will need in order to be a metaphorian. So our first skill is detecting. Detecting is being able to recognize it and setting an intention to catch the metaphors. When I wrote the book on metaphorical thinking, I grabbed a notebook and I just carried it with me for 2 or 3 weeks. And I just wrote down every metaphor anybody was saying or any metaphor that I thought. I wrote down metaphors when I was watching TV, whether it was the news, whether it was a movie. I went on a metaphor adventure. I was like a dog sniffing out metaphors. And so detecting it. Once you start paying attention to metaphors, you'll really be amazed. I was. They're everywhere. So detect them first, now discover them. That's our second skill. Second skill is asking about what is being compared to what. And if this is the basic subject, what is it like? What else could it be like? What is this relationship between each other? Sometimes you can find the comparison if you look at the etymology in a dictionary. Where did the word come from? And oftentimes it was literal, concrete when it began. Then it became more metaphorical and abstract. So discovering the metaphor and entering into that mystery and start to smell it. And you'll start to identify this magical realm of metaphors and discovering things that are being communicated but not said. So discovering it. Next, we need to analyze it. So our third skill is analysis. And our next slide, some of the words of analysis. So when you analyze it, what's the source? Is this a animal metaphor? Is this a computer metaphor? Does this metaphor come from boiling water? What is the source? What is the experiential grounding? So what do I see, hear, smell, taste, feel, and experiential grounding? What emotions are evoked by it? Because it can evoke a lot of emotion. What entailments? What comes along with it that you didn't intend for it to come along? So symbols being used, relationship between it, implications. So that'd be some of the implying. And our next slide gives you kind of a way to think about it. This is how I think about it. At the very bottom with why, that's the subject. The first metaphor, here's the source domain, wherever it came from. If it came from a comparison to computers or a comparison to people or animals. And then what is implied? What is really hidden in assumptions and presuppositions in the background? Our fourth skill with a metaphor is to run with it. And this is really one of the fun parts of it. Accept it, embrace it, and now run with it. See where it takes you. See how far it goes. See what arises along the way, how it works, how it does not work, its boundary. So here we have a metaphor. He is careening down the corridors of his mind. So if I take that metaphor and I run with it, he's careening down. So he's moving down the corridors of his mind. How fast is he moving? What are the corridors? How many corridors are there? Where will the corridors take him? what has triggered all this energy to be careening down the corridors of his mind? What is he running away from? What is he running to? There's a lot of questions that could be asked when someone uses a metaphor like that. And so the skill of just running with it and seeing where it goes. We do that in coaching a lot when we hear a metaphor that's very effective and one that's very ineffective. And so the running with the metaphor. The fifth skill is reversing a metaphor. Let's just turn it inside out, turn it upside down, reverse it. So if we have the metaphor, time heals all wounds, we could turn that around. Time wounds all heals. If you have the metaphor about throwing in the towel, you could then, the thing that I'm reminded of is you have to have a towel when you hitchhike the universe. Going to the book and the movie by that title, Hitchhiking the Universe. And so now reverse it. Instead of throwing in the towel, grab the towel. In the movie The Matrix, do not think that it is the spoon that bends. It is you who bend. So in all of these ways, we're reversing. We're turning it upside down or inside out and playing with it. So running with it, but now reversing it. You can use the sixth skill, negating with a metaphor. And in fact, this is probably the best way to make an idea, a thought, a feeling go away. So if you're tortured by a thought, if a thought just keeps coming back to you again and again and again, if you command it to go away, that's the command negation. Doesn't work. It tends to make it stronger. But if you used a metaphor, and here's a whole list of them, you could see it evaporate. You could push the delete button. You could imagine acid rain falling on it and it just dissolving away, flushing it down the toilet. So all of these metaphors are metaphors that you can use to negate ideas that have had their time and really didn't bring out your best, and you'd like to make them go away. So negating with a metaphor is a pretty powerful skill, especially if you need to unlearn something or just not be responsive to something that triggers you to react. Our seventh skill is one that's implied with what we've already said. And that's play with a metaphor. Run with it, turn it inside out, play with it to see if you can introduce a funny perspective, because that's one of the powers of a metaphor, to induce humor. Here we have metaphors that already imply some humor. We might say that he's not the sharpest knife in the kitchen. And of course, we're implying that his IQ or his quickness of wit is not real sharp, and sharp meaning skillful and clever. He's like a sponge ready to suck up the overflow dishwater. So playing with a metaphor. And there's lots of metaphors that are already funny, playful. So we can do that as a skill. Number 8, we've already suggested metaphors can create. So creating with a metaphor. And so as you play around with a metaphor, just noticing what new things emerge and what new ways of thinking can emerge. And so some metaphors about creativity. You can be a sculpture of ideas as you create metaphors. In the garden of your mind, you can pull the weeds and plant seeds. So these are statements about how we can do so much creating with a metaphor. In NeuroSemantics, we have numerous metaphors. I created all kinds of things with metaphors, from dragon slaying, dragon taming, to Matrix, to the Crucible, to the meta plays. So creating with a metaphor can give us a whole new way of thinking, a new model, a new frame of reference. The next one is designing. So once you create something, now you can design it. And that's our next slide, designing something. And here's some examples of what we have already in neurosemantics. We got several trainings and books about games. If life is a game, what are the rules? So games great lovers play, games fit and slim people play, games business experts play. So it's a metaphor that we've now taken and designed a whole way of thinking that'll lead to new resources and more effectiveness. You can prime with metaphors. That's number 10. The 10th one is priming, using a metaphor to hint at something, suggest it, create response potential. And so instead of it being what you're creating, you're just now preparing the space so that something new can emerge. Some superheroes like Batman have no special powers, except he had a strong intention and a passion for justice. Now, what that suggests, what that metaphor is building up, is that maybe we don't need any special superhuman powers. Maybe we just need some good intentions and some passion. And then suddenly we become a superhero. And finally, the last one is the skill of challenging. And so anything powerful can be powerfully misused. And so with metaphors, you can challenge with a metaphor, but be careful. They can be destructive and harmful and toxic. So we say things like, she's trapped in an emotion. Well, that's not a healthy challenge. That's a pretty unhealthy one. And so is the fear has paralyzed her, so she can't do anything. Or my inner child is stopping me. And so now we can challenge the metaphor. Does the metaphor really help? Does the metaphor bring up things that are actually harmful or destructive? And now we can challenge the metaphor and look for a better metaphor. When metaphors become dangerous, that's the next slide, be careful. You can weaponize a metaphor in such a way that it becomes a threat or a danger. Here's some really destructive ones. I'll never get over his death. So the metaphor, getting over, completing, coming to terms with, is now stated as a negation. I'll never. I'm drowning at work with all I have to do. Well, talk about a communication to yourself that can be very destructive, create stress, create a sense of drowning, and then desperateness. He's been pushed to the edge. So what are your questions about metaphors?
Any questions on metaphors? Michael, that was quite amazing, when I was listening to all of that, it just opened up a whole new page for me. And, never looked at it that way before. I just think that, sometimes. Yes.
Is that page a page of new ideas? Is that a page that's bright and shiny?
Oh, it's boundless.
A boundless page. So now you and I are running with a metaphor.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael. This is Manuel from Mexico.
Yes.
I have a question. Which could be the difference, if any, between metaphor and the storytelling using in training?
So, Anthony, can you repeat that? I'm not quite.
Manuel is asking, what's the difference between using metaphors and storytelling in training?
Metaphors mostly are one words, two words, just a short phrase, maybe a sentence. that would run with a metaphor. Stories is really an experience that I've had, someone else has had. It's going to have a character, it's going to have plot, it's going to have a protagonist. So stories are much, much longer and complicated pieces of literature.
But then, Michael, a story can be actually a whole metaphor of an idea, like the Matrix, right? The whole story.
Right. You can take a metaphor, one word, and you can expand it into a story.
Okay.
A story will then have characters and plots and scenarios and other things.
Does it means that both have the same intention to create, to induce, to generate new knowledge, etc.?
Do metaphors create new knowledge?
Yeah,
Is that the question?
my question is if both metaphor and storytelling have the same objectives at the end
No,
for training.
no. If I were to identify all of the objectives of metaphor, all the objectives of story, there's so many objectives. You can use it in so many different ways. That's its flexibility and its expansiveness. So they're not necessarily the same. In training with metaphors, we generally use a metaphor to add some richness and color to whatever we're saying. So that's a metaphor. I just threw in painting and coloring my words. And so it adds color and variety to it. It jazzes up the language. That's why we use the figures of speech. Where story really, if you use a story in a training, you're trying to correspond with the experience I've had or someone else had, and the journey of that experience, coming to terms with a problem, solving it, is designed to help a person step into that experience and walk through it at an unconscious level, which prepares the person for the pattern or the training or the teaching that's going to occur.
Thank you.
Jeff has a question which says, would it be okay to identify powerful ecological metaphors and install through mind-to-muscle pattern?
Sure. That'd be the way to handle it effectively. Identify the metaphor, kind of run with it, play with it, see how well it works. And then if it works well, you could use the metaphor inside of a principle.
Mm-hmm.
So an example might be health and wellness. The immune system is designed to separate and to know the difference between me and not me. So the T cells inside the white blood vessels in your bone marrow, in your gut, and throughout the whole body is the immune system, and it distinguishes self and not self. And sometimes the immune system makes a mistake, and we want to send a message. Inside of the allergy pattern of NOP, the metaphor is, let me put that allergen on the other side of a plexiglass. Let me see the me who has a problem with that allergen. I have an allergic response. And then feeling a sense of safety, I'm going to lower that plexiglass until I can handle that allergen with a sense of safety. So the metaphor of a plexiglass, which protects me, I'm not in the room, the allergen has no access to me, but as I feel more safe, as I communicate to myself, it's not dangerous. It's just pollen. It's just cat hair. and then slowly lower that plexiglass, that metaphor tends to be a good metaphor to work. So then you could turn that into a principle.
Yeah, that question also reminded me that, when we are training a group of people from different cultures, so, the English metaphor that we use may not land as well as different cultures, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
So
that's why
then
we have to discover it, run with it, see where it works, where it doesn't work,
And
and
there's
use
a
one that's
question from
culturally relevant.
Rodrigo. It says, why we should never explain a metaphor.
Oh, I think you should sometimes. The best time to explain it is when it's messing something up. So communication. What is communication when two people communicate? Well, it's kind of like a war. Someone wants to win, someone wants to lose. You shoot your ideas, and they shot me down. They shot down my ideas. Well, that metaphor is a war metaphor, and people use it all the time in business and organizations. And I think we should explain it. The metaphor you're using presupposes we're enemies on opposite sides, and someone's going to win, someone's going to die. I mean, it's a terrible metaphor of communication. A much better communication metaphor would be communication is like a dance.
Yeah. And we have Gerson Senna from Brazil. His question, Yeshua used parables and metaphors to teach. In your point of view, Michael, what was the reason for this methodology of his?
Well, you cannot not speak with a metaphor. You're going to speak with metaphors. The only question is, are you being conscious or unconscious? Are you being intentional or unintentional? Do you know what you're doing with your metaphors? So not only are you going to teach with a metaphor, you're going to speak with a metaphor, you're going to think with a metaphor. Metaphors are inevitable. All language is metaphorical. Nothing is actual and literal. So we better learn how to do metaphorical thinking more effectively so that we don't hurt ourselves with our metaphors. People can hurt themselves with their metaphors. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah. And you said that 1 in 4 words is a metaphor anyway. So I better start counting mine when I use them. I'm not aware.
Yeah. There is a whole area in hypnosis called organ language, and it's metaphors. She's such a pain in the neck. Well, if you say that, if you think that, because now you're using a metaphor of a bodily hurt, pain, and you're actually sending that message to your body. And so organ language is how we misuse metaphors and actually communicate illness and ill health to ourselves with metaphors.
Ronald's question, when a word stops being a metaphor, what does it become?
Cliche. Becomes a cliche. Now it's threadbare. So we say that this metaphor is threadbare, which is a metaphor. So if you're sitting down, if you got a new pair of jeans and you're sitting down all the time, sitting, after a while, you can wear the threads of your bottom thin, so that that part of the clothing gets thin, and that's what happens with a metaphor. It's threadbare, and so it doesn't have much substance to it anymore.
Yeah. So when it becomes a cliche, it doesn't carry the substance anymore, right? The meaning is not as strong as what you really mean. Yeah.
We stop listening to the metaphor when it's a cliche.
Yeah. Okay. Mazuki, you want to tell us about the next part of the program now in terms of the breakout rooms?
Right. So we are going to the breakout room, and I have sent the questions into the chat box just now. If you are using a handphone, you can screenshot these questions. So we are going into breakout room for about 12 minutes, and there'll be about 4 or 5 people in each room, and I would like have fun discussing on these questions. With this buffet of learning, what have you learned about metaphors? Makes me hungry thinking about buffet. If you think it would be a good
Good.
idea to start paying attention to metaphors, what will you do in the coming week? So those are the 2 questions you'll be discussing in the first breakout room. So I'm going to set the breakout room to and because about 4 or 5 people in each room. And what I'll do is, if I notice that there is only one person in that room, I will just hoist you out of that room and throw you into another room. So I'll do that. So
Metaphorically.
metaphorically. So the rooms are now open. I'll see you in 12 minutes time, and just enjoy yourself meeting, and remember to get to know one another again. Okay, so I'll see you in 12 minutes.
Metaphor overload. Anyone there out there? From our room, Jakob, go ahead.
Unmute your mic, Jakob.
Microphone.
Yes.
Is it on now?
It is.
Yes. Yes. I think a great takeaway is that metaphors is such a natural part of our language that we are using metaphors all the time without being conscious about it.
Yeah.
And I think the lecture you gave, Michael, is great, because it's really amazing to see how many metaphors we can detect and discover the meanings, and how we can play with them and ask questions around metaphors. So thank you very much.
Mm.
Thank you, Jakob.
And detection is a metaphor. Being a detective with a spyglass to go look for.
We have sharing in the chat box here from Elvish. She put it here, sharing the differences between China idioms and Western idioms. Be aware to open our ears to track the metaphors that we are using. Also, others are using it. Start to identify the metaphor in lives. And whenever I conduct APG, we have the metastating dragon states, and operating from the Eastern sides, I need to explain the Western metaphor for dragon as opposed to the Eastern metaphor for dragon.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, when anybody is upset that we're slaying dragons, I remind them that the subtitle of dragon slaying is slaying, taming, and energizing dragons.
Does anyone have any questions before we go to our Zoom room 2?
There one in the chat, Xiu
yes.
Hongping.
From Xiu Hong, Michael, a coach in China, said that she has seen a PCC coach is promoting an imagery coaching where she uses metaphorical in her coaching session, looking for metaphors and then change the metaphor to solve client problem. What do you think of using metaphor coaching as main way to do coaching session?
Well, once again, you cannot not use a metaphor in coaching. The metaphors are there. So once you can detect them, then you can call attention to the ones that work well and the ones that do not work well. And I use metaphor. I'm always listening for metaphors in coaching, and sometimes playing with them with a client, running with them to see what's going on with that person in terms of the metaphor they're using. And yes, sometimes we need to challenge the metaphor and to encourage the person to get a better metaphor because the one they're using has implications that are not very good.
Okay.
In the field of NLP, James Lawley, Penny Pumpkin wrote a book on symbolic modeling, and it's all around metaphors. And so they get a metaphor. Someone says they're the wall, and I can't get past the wall. Okay, so what does the wall look like? How thick is the wall? Could you go around the wall? Could you go over the wall? What if we dug underneath the wall? And so, what if the wall was made out of water? What if it was an energy wall and you just walk through it? And so, playing with these metaphors, the metaphors in the mind, if a person treats them too concretely and think that there is a wall and forget that it's just a way of talking about some experience, then they can get stuck. And of course, as a coach, we would want to help them to get unstuck from that metaphor.
And a question from Ronald here. Besides words, how can we use semantic space as a metaphor?
So metaphors are, first of all, words, but metaphors can be movements. So if I keep taking my hands and going up and saying, I'm feeling more and more of this, I'm feeling less and less of this, then behaviorally, my hands, even when I don't say the words, just can be a metaphor for increasing or decreasing. And of course, that's semantic space. So where I put time, where I put self, if myself is from here or myself is out there or others. So all the semantic space is metaphorical as well. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
And here's a question from Ines. What is the relation between metaphors and proverbs?
Well, a proverb is a wise statement. So it's usually something that somebody has concluded after some experiences, and it's a wise statement that in a certain context will be a nice principle or a heuristic, a guideline for how to live. He who hesitates loses. If you jump out of the frying pan into the fire, so a proverb is a wise statement in a certain context, and usually they involve metaphors, but they're not the same as a metaphor.
Thank you. Any other question before we move to the next breakout room? So here's the question for the next breakout room. Did you become aware of any unuseful or even toxic metaphor that you have used? What is it? Why do you now think it is not a resourceful metaphor to use? And the second question is, did you find any metaphor that you want to negate or change or update? If so, what metaphor? How will you update it or negate it? So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms in a short while, and I will have less rooms because I noticed that there are some people who do not go to the rooms probably because of the spoken language. So I'll have less rooms so that there'll be at least about 3 people in the room. So if there are more, that's okay. So I hope you have fun in the rooms, and I'll see you in 12 minutes' time. Welcome back, everyone. Great to see you again. And what stories do you have to share about unuseful or even toxic metaphors that you have used for yourself? So anyone would like to go first?
When we ended, we were talking about diseases and the metaphors we use for diseases, going to the hospital, cancer, something, and identified that there are several toxic ones like my cancer, my tumor, which is the ownership metaphor. And so that's what we were talking about.
Okay. Wow.
So I
Zarina?
was saying, yes, I was saying as we got kicked out of the breakout room, is that my mum reframed her ownership as a temporary lease. Like she kept on saying, my tenant that's going to be kicked out soon.
Okay. Nice.
Michael, when you said now, the metaphor about my, this was like something new I could not understand. So how can we classify metaphors if mine is one? Based on what I use to classify the metaphor?
Well, so where did it come from? So one of the metaphors in our group just now, somebody said to one of our participants that going to the hospital is like fixing an old broken down engine. Well, that's a mechanical metaphor that comes from auto repair. And if you use the word mine, then it's coming from a sense of ownership. So it's an ownership metaphor. So just asking, what's the source of the metaphor?
Okay. So ownership is one classification. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I am going to have to plug in my computer or I'm going to run out of battery. So I'll let all of you continue for a moment.
So I guess the ownership metaphor is basically when it doesn't serve you, right? You're saying that, we are talking about the health thing also. And some people say, I'm a diabetic. Are you? You have diabetes as a condition. You're not a diabetic. But people use it, I'm a diabetic. So they make themselves own that thing and become them, you see? So you want to move it out of you. Because if it's outside of you, you can deal with it and have resources, bring resources to deal with it, as opposed to say, I'm a diabetic. So whenever anybody I talk to, they say, hey, I'm a diabetic. I say, no, you're not. They say, oh, you have diabetes, is it? Yeah, that means high sugar and all that you can't control, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Michael?
So that's the identity metaphor that when you identify with and make it innate inside of you, then and if it's a negative thing, then it really is toxic. That's a good illustration, Anthony.
Michael, still on this topic of owning a certain metaphor, because I've been speaking to this person who keeps mentioning to her mental illness rather than mental condition, and the reason why she used the word mental illness is so that I can be treated. So may I have your thoughts on that? I mentioned to her that how about reframing it as a mental condition? And she said, no, I need to accept that I have mental illness.
Yeah. So now the metaphor comes from the field of sickness and illness, and physical illness makes a lot of sense. But mental illness, because the mind is thinking, and if the mind is not thinking clearly, we could use a metaphor of vision and visual. How clear is your thinking? So I have mental fog would be a better metaphor than mental illness, because if it's fog, we just let the sun rise and the fog will go away. If it's illness, then we need medicine, we need doctors, and so most mental illness, there's too much emotion, too much grief, anger, depression, something. And so the emotion is, and the thinking, the emotion is confusing the thinking. So the thinking is not in charge of the emotion. So we could use a metaphor of which is in charge, the emotion or the thinking.
Okay.
And who's the master? And then it would be mental mastery, and how to develop mental mastery. So yeah, I think you're on the right channel when you're sort of challenging that illness metaphor.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. A question from Ronald here. Could you give examples of metaphors associated with each matrix?
Well, the matrix itself is a metaphor. It's a metaphor of an inner dimension that you move from outside to inside, and now you got the meaning. Well, meaning literally means whatever you're holding in mind. So here's holding. So how do you hold something in mind? Well, that's a metaphor. That's a physical metaphor of holding, embracing something. And whatever you're embracing as a thought, so that's the metaphor in the area of meaning. Intention comes from tending. So the original term in Latin and French was tending. You tend to something. You care for something. So whenever you care for something, you value it. And that then becomes your intention. And so the metaphor itself. And this is where the etymology of the words reveals the original metaphor that was used to build up the term itself. When we come to power, most of us think about physical power. We think about energy or power. We might think about strength. That'd be a different metaphor than power. And yet the literal meaning of power is to do. So ability to do is capacity or capability, and capability is a talent that's turned into a skill. So we got quite a few metaphors, and which one do you want to use for power, for energy? When you dive into this stuff, you'll find not only are metaphors everywhere, but there's layers of them, and then identifying which one works best. When it comes to power, then it's the second metaphor. Is it power with someone, or is it the power over someone? So power over someone, not so healthy. Power with is collaboration, is relationship, is connection. And so that becomes very healthy. So the second metaphor, over or with, and just imagine how small these words are, over and with.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've been here for an hour and 40 minutes already. I think it is time to wrap up. And before we wrap up, I would like to ask Michael if you can give final words before we wrap up, Michael.
Well, you now know that you are a metaphorian. You think in metaphors, you speak in metaphors, you experience metaphors. It's part and parcel of our lives. And so now, becoming clear about it and doing good quality metaphor checking so that our communication is more clear, our health is more robust and have more vitality. So to your adventure in metaphors this next week, may you find some great ones, ones that are energizing, ones that are fun, ones that you can share with family and friends.
Thank you for that, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you to all of you for being here. I really appreciate your being here. And Michael, really thank you for your time. This is your 1 day off in NSTT and you are here with us. So I'm so grateful for this. So before we end, may I ask every one of you to switch on your camera so that I can take a photo, a snapshot. So cameras on, no time to put on your makeups, so you'll have to deal with it. And ready or not? 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Another one. Now big smile. There we go. So thank you very much. Hope to see you again next month. Good week ahead. God bless. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Great NSTT, Michael. Bye-bye, people.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Please convey my love to all those at NSTT, Michael.
Will do.
Thank you.
Have a safe flight from the Red Sea.
Bye. Bye, Jacob.
Jacob, I like your hairstyle.